Hello, everyone. Thanks to the power of the internet, I'm allowed to talk with you. And I gotta know, how did this thing not top? Like, I know I don't get to play with it personally because it's not in English yet. And Divine Z stuff, DZ-1 stuff, is still very new, but this deck right here that I'm showing, something I threw together and should honestly be topping because the resource management in this game is phenomenal. And if you're playing it right, you should always have options. So let's go over it. Of course, the ride line is as it is. You're going to have Serenella as your grade 1, and because it's a Direful Doll, it's always in the main deck. You're running max of everything here. But you look at top 7 and you choose 2 and put them into Soul. When she boosts, if you got a grade 3 or greater, it gets 5,000, till end of that battle, but you gotta bind it, which isn't a big deal, and you should know the why, but I'll go over it in a little bit. Grade 2 is pretty kind of the same, except you call it to rear, and when it's called to rear is when you get its full thing. You put another Direful Doll from hand into Soul, you draw, and your Vanguard in this get 5k. Very good. Sadly, she doesn't bind herself, but there are other ways to do so. And finally, we have the boy himself, Androld, who is very simple. Counterblast 1. You choose up to an amount equal to your opponent's grade. So if they're grade 2, you get 2. 3, they get 3. If they're playing grade 4, 4. If someone is mad enough outside of me to be playing Dragon Tree, call 11, call 10. Please don't. No, it's not a good idea. But and you get Drive +1 if you call 3. So basically, it's free value. Counterblast 1, draw 3. And you're not playing from hand. If you're doing this right, you're having fun with your Soul, very Pale Moon-esque. Though, the best thing about this is when this unit is attacked, this isn't a once per turn type thing. You choose a Workeroid with Direful Doll on its name from your bind zone. You call it to Guardian, and it gets an additional 5,000 shield. So basically, you're getting free shield value, which makes a lot more sense when we talk more about the triggers, and I'll get to it. But let's talk about the main deck first. Obviously, you're playing 3 of everything in the ride line except the grade 0. Some things that aren't in the ride line, to fill it out, is her, Liberata, when placed on rear or on Guardian. Remember, you can technically give this grade 3 shield value. If you have Direful Doll, which obviously you do, you choose 1 from your drop and you put it into your Soul. Very good, because once if you choose from bind, put it to guard, it obviously goes into drop, you throw it back into Soul, your grade 3 turn, counterblast 1, call it back out, rinse and repeat, it binds itself. See, you're never really playing from your hand, unless it's, put from hand into Soul. And if it attacks a grade 3 or greater, it gets 10,000 power, but you gotta bind it, counterblast 1, and you draw a card. You do not have to do the draw a card effect if you want to conserve CB. The other Direful Dolls in here are who I'm going to call Provolone. I know it's not, it's Providenza. Sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing names. It was never something I was good at. This unit attacks a grade 3 or greater. If you have a grade 3 or greater, it gets 10k until end of battle, so a 20k, which is very good numbers. And at the end of the battle, it attacked grade 3 or greater, Energy Blast, and bind this. You choose a Direful with a different name from Soul and call it to rear, so she enables multi-attack. So it's probably her into a Liberata, maybe Griselda, because don't forget this is on place of rear guard, which immediately everything tries to, activate. So you would get that, and you give another power. So if you really want to get some bump behind your Vanguard with triple drive. You have Griselda, because she herself gives herself 5, and the Vanguard 5. Griselda, not Griselda, Provolone back into Griselda, or even Liberta into a Griselda. There's so much you can do with this, you just gotta be wide open with it. And the last grade 1 Direful Doll is Heligea. Sorry. At the end of the battle at boosted, if you have Direful Doll, bind it, choose 2 from your drop and put into Soul. And Guardian, it's another 5k shield, meaning it's a 15 if you call it from bind, making her a pseudo trigger. Now, you might have noticed that you want all the Direful Dolls in here, and that's kind of a trap here. Because I've been thinking, this is a little investment cost because you're fighting, Androld for it. But when this attacks a grade 3 or greater, you choose a unit from drop and it gets 5k for each grade you put into Soul. You don't look at the other effect because it's if you have a grade 4 or greater Vanguard, which you won't. But basically it's more recursion from Soul and adding the things like triggers that might not have it or anything to get your Direful Dolls back in. And of course she gets a nice little power boost from it. You can't call her back out with something because it specifically says Direful Doll, but if you gotta play from hand, you at least got some options. I'm a total dummy and forgot a Direful Doll through this. Simone over here is Counterblast 1. If you at least have 5 or more cards in your Soul, if someone would have to call a guard, they gotta call 2 or more at the same time. It's a nice little guard restrict to help push for the games, but with how consistent this deck is, you can drop it for ride, throw it in, call it out. You can do whatever. If you see 1, you're always going to see it whenever you want to see it, so it's for those endgame pushes. Obviously, this is a 4 of Zargon. I think they even showed this on stream. Whenever you boost, choose 2 cards. It's got to hit a Vanguard, my bad. Any from 2 cards from drop, throw into Soul. This applies so much pressure mentally, whether they want you to do that or not. And finally, if you might be curious why we have some Almagistar cards in here. And it's perfect, because if you've noticed from the main deck, nothing binds another card with Direful Doll. They only just bind themselves. Now here's the fun thing. Once per turn, if your opponent is grade 3 or greater, you may bind a trigger unit from Soul. And if you note from anything I've just said, you throw so much into Soul, but nothing happens to the triggers, unless you're calling them out, from Counterblast just for support. But that's not really fully utilizing your guarding potential that you can do every single time this unit's attacked. And it also gets 10k power, so it's an 18k booster. Now, think about it. If you look at the triggers, we have some crit triggers that they gave us from the set. Direful Doll Bethany is a nice little crit trigger. But also, your heal triggers. This is from the trial deck with Androld, Alexandra, but also because Stride is going to be so far out and massive consuming, and there's also, Androld. There's a lot of ways to get grade 4. Now think about it. If you heal with this once, and then you put it into Soul and bind it with her, with Carmen over here, who specifically says, if your opponent's grade is greater than you, it gets a shield plus 10. So this is a 20k guard. With the addition of the boost he gives, it's a 25k guard that you used to power up a rearguard. And don't forget, this can be repeated. Zargan, any of the Direful Dolls, because it's a Direful Doll. It's just so masterful in the class of a defensive deck. And other cards, you might notice OT. I'm just running the normal one, but most people do the blue OT, which I didn't forget its name, don't even ask me. Because you get to choose any unit and it gets a critical. But more importantly, you choose, once again, anything from drop and add it to hand, so maybe a Persona Ride, anything, honestly. One draw, because honestly, you're already doing enough drawing in this deck, and you're more worried about your drop and your bind than you are your actual hand. And because the units hit hard, but nothing helps a little bit more than just 2 fronts. You don't need more because this is a triple drive deck, so of course you go 8 critical. But yeah, let me just quickly quit out of this and just... This is already a crap hand. Technically anything can and will be salvaged, but... Alright, so let's say I'm going first. You draw your card. Obviously, we want Griselda for its fact that when you put it to rearguard, you put one of your Direful Dolls from hand into soul, and you draw, and you get power off of that. So, honestly, as long as you're ditching a Direful Doll, I think you're fine. We don't quite need her yet, because you don't have anything from drop to use her. But support ain't too bad either, so I say drop the grade 3. Ride. Obviously, she doesn't get an effect, and we're going first. I always assume I'm taking 1 or 2 damage. I'll take 2 in test hands if I don't hit a trigger. I do, though, so let's say they don't hit me. Alright, my turn. I'm allowed to attack. So, once again, Provolone over here only does good when you have more Direful Dolls in your soul. Nope, do not. I hate when I do that. Let me just fix that up real quick. You soul. We'll just add her to drop. There we go. And now we ride, which activates the effect of our grade 1, which, if you remember, look at top 7, add 2. So we are going to look 7. Obviously, we see some. This hurts, but this one doesn't. You add her to soul. It's up to 2. We obviously don't want to get rid of our Persona Ride, but we do have the option of healing or a crit. At this point, I would just call it there. It's not the best thing in the world, but shuffle a few times. Now, though, I would say that playing her is pretty valuable because your opponent still is on a grade 1. But you also got to remember that next turn, we're adding 1 to... We're actually playing Griselda, which we'll call to rear, and you got to add 1. And I kind of want to skimp and have 2. So let's just see where our drive check gets us. Alright, not too bad. This is the one that hurts the most. I'd say take 3 to 4 damage now in testing. Heal. We do heal. Front. I'm going to say they somehow did another one. Oh, so many triggers. They're not doing more damage. So stand and draw. She's important, so we're going to keep her. So we're going to throw a crit. And finally, ride deck, our boy. Now, you soul. Call to rear. Obviously her effect, we are going to add her to soul. We're going to draw a card. It's unfortunate that we drew him, but we still get power to these 2. Don't forget he is a main, so this is beauty. You only get to call 2, so you don't get triple drive, but I would still counterblast 1. I forget that I have to disselect cards sometimes, so View Soul, add or drop, just so I can easily damage. Alright. Alright, pretend it's still the grade 3, I'm no longer putting up with it. So we're obviously going to call her, because if it's placed on rear, we do now have a grade 3, despite me keep trying to ride the heal trigger. And we can put anything from drop into soul, as long as it's a Direful Doll. We aren't getting its other effect, but that's totally fine. We are mainly calling her to the rear. So we can add Provolone to the soul. Now we're not quite done yet, because we get one more. View Soul. We could choose the one we just put in. We do have another Direful Doll in there, but I think the best option right now is Sorella, because when this unit attacks or boosts, if you got a grade 3, you get 5 power, and you just bind her. So, just like that, you move into battle, swing, 2 checks, heal, we'll go off her, very nice. Swing, end the battle. We do got a grade 3 or greater, so she gets 5k, making this very hard to guard on their grade 2 turn. And bump, we already got someone in the bind. And that's kind of like the general plan. If you look, our hand is pretty big already with 8 cards. And with him, we can just call her back. She will go to drop. And this is just kind of how the deck keeps on going. You have a bait over with Liberta over there. Once again, this is just a test play. But this is a very defensive deck, which is a very key part. But you also always got to remember this deck has a lot of offense too. It potentially gets 4 attacks. You get triple drive basically every turn. And even if you don't, you're still always swinging for around those weird 15, 23s. Stuff that requires at least some guard from your opponent, who at the moment is trying to douse your hand size, but you're like, but what if every time you attack me, I just take something from bind, which I keep clearing my field for. So once again, I ask, why isn't this thing topping? It's so good and versatile. But let me know what you guys think. And once again, if you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my mad ramblings. This goes on longer the more passionate I am, or the more mistakes I make along the way. Oops. But hey.